Hi, grade 11. So today we're doing the chapter 5 review. This is in preparation for your test, which is on Wednesday, May 20. That's next Wednesday. And Tuesday you'll have time to do some review questions. So just take notes on this. There's no handout for this. So the first thing we talked about in this chapter was special triangles. And those special triangles were the 45, 45, 90. And on the 45, 45, 90 triangle, the two side lengths that are even are 1 unit, and the hypotenuse is root 2. Then we have the 30, 60, 90 triangle. And those side lengths are 1, the hypotenuse is 2, and the third length is root 3. So remember that you need to have these memorized and that you should know how to use them to find exact values for the primary trig ratios. The second thing we talked about was primary and reciprocal ratios. So the primary ratios are SOHCAHTOA, and you need to remember that these only work for right triangles. So we have sine x equals opposite over hypotenuse. We have cos x equals adjacent over hypotenuse. And we have tan x equals opposite over adjacent. Then we have the reciprocal ratios, which are cosecant x, which is 1 over sine x. So that would make it hypotenuse over opposite. Then we have secant x, which is the reciprocal of cos x. So that's 1 over cos x, which would make it hypotenuse over adjacent. And then we have cotangent x, which is 1 over tan x, which would make it adjacent over opposite. The next thing we talked about was standard position. So that's referring to angles between 0 and 360. So if I have this little coordinate plane, then I have the cast rule, so CAST, which tells me which trig ratio is positive in which quadrant. Then if I had a point here, so that would be a point, and maybe it's -1, -1, then I would form a triangle. This would be length R. This here would be angle beta, because it's my related acute angle. And this angle here, all the way to the terminal arm, would be angle theta. So I'm just going to write some of that in words. So the principal angle, theta equals the principal angle. It starts at the positive x-axis and goes counterclockwise to the terminal arm. And then beta is the related acute angle. And the related acute angle is between 0 and 90 degrees. All right, and then the cast rule, it tells us which ratios are positive in each quadrant. There are always two ratios. That produce the same positive ratio. and two that produce the same negative ratio. Between 0 and 360. Remember, your calculator gives you the solution closest to 0. All right, so just a little example of this. If I give you the point -2, 5, and I say find theta, so find the principal angle. So if we just sketch that, the point -2, 5 would be here because we go back 2 and up 5. Then we'll connect that, make it into a triangle. This side length would be 2, this side length would be 5. So the first thing we would need to do would be to find r. So r would be calculated, r equals the square root of x squared plus y squared equals the square root of -2 squared plus 5 squared equals the square root of 4 plus 25 equals the square root of 29. So r is root 29. And then I can use this SOHCAHTOA. So in quadrant 2, sine is positive. So I'm going to use sine, and I'm going to say sine theta equals, actually, sorry, this would be sine beta, because first I need to find the related acute angle. So SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So this angle here, opposite, is 5, and the hypotenuse is root 29. So to find angle beta, I would do sine inverse of 5 over root 29. Punch that into your calculator, and that is 68.2. So this angle here is 68.2. Now I need to find the principal angle, which starts at the x-axis and goes to here. I know that if I kept on going all the way, that would be 180. So if I go 180 minus 68.2, that will give me angle theta. So if you do that, that's 111.8. But I know that there's going to be two positive values for this. So where else is sine positive? Well, sine is also positive in quadrant 1 because everything is positive in quadrant 1. So using the related acute angle, drawing that in quadrant 1, 68.2, I'm starting at 0 and I'm going up 68.2. So my other angle for theta is 68.2. And now if you would, on your calculator, just to check if you have it right, you could do sine 111.8 equals and sine 68.2 equals, and you will get the same answer. All right, the next thing we talked about was trig identities. And we learned two of them. The first one was the quotient identity. And the quotient identity said tan x equals sine x over cos x. And then those could also be, that could also be rearranged to be sine x equals tan x times cos x, or cos x equals sine x over tan x. And then the Pythagorean identity says sine squared x plus cos squared x equals 1. That can be rearranged to be sine squared x equals 1 minus cos squared x, or cos squared x equals 1 minus sine squared x. Remember that when you're solving identities, keep the left side separate from the right side. and then end with the left side equals right side QED statement. Okay. Next we talked about the sine law. And you can use the sine law when you have one complete ratio and you're missing part of another. So the sine law is sine A over A equals sine B over B equals sine C over C, or A over sine A equals B over sine B equals C over sine C. And remember the ambiguous case. So when you're given side-side angle, if A is less than H, there are no solutions. If A equals H, there's one solution. And if A is greater than H, there are two solutions. All right, and then the cosine law, use when you have side, 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 or side, angle, side. The cosine law says A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cos A, and it can also be rearranged for B and C as well. And then the last thing we talked about was solving 3D problems. So when you're solving 3D problems, use the simplest tool that connects two triangles in 3 dimensions. So some of your options are SOHCAHTOA, Pythagorean theorem, sine law, or cosine law. All right, so that wraps up the chapter. On Tuesday, you'll have time for some review questions, and then the test will be on Wednesday. I'll be posting these notes that I just wrote for you so that you have clear notes to study from. I'll post them probably on our chat or maybe with this assignment. But let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.